Hi, I'm Marilynn Hughes. We're going to discuss how to go from selfishness to selflessness. As many of you know, I had a near-death experience wherein Jesus Christ told me that the whole purpose of our human life is to go from selfishness to selflessness. And several people have asked me to explain how do we do that. I'm going to try to explain that to you with the help of some of my friends, beginning with Father Adolf Tanqueray and the spiritual life. Life is a struggle. Our lower faculties tend lustily towards pleasure, whilst the higher ones are drawn towards moral good. Often conflict goes on between these. What pleases us is not always morally good, and to establish order, reason must fight hostile tendencies and actually conquer. This is the fight of the spirit against the flesh, of the will against passion. This struggle is at times hard and painful. Just as in the springtime of the year the sap rises up within plants, so at times violent impulses towards pleasure rise in the sensitive part of our soul. These impulses, nevertheless, are not irresistible. The will, helped by the intellect, exercises over these movements of passion a fourfold control. The power of foresight, which consists in foreseeing and forestalling a great many dangerous fancies, impressions, and emotions, by a constant and intelligent vigilance. The power of inhibition and moderation, by means of which we either check or at least allay the violent passions which arise in the soul. Thus we are able to prevent our eyes from lighting upon dangerous objects, our imagination from dwelling upon unwholesome pictures. Should a fit of anger stir, we are able to stem it. The power of stimulation, which through the will stirs and gives impetus to the movements of the passions. The power of direction, which allows us to direct those movements towards good and thereby to divert them from evil. Besides this inward strife, there may be other conflicts between the soul and its maker. Although it is evident that our plain duty is that of entire submission to our sovereign master, yet for this subjection we must pay the price. A lust for freedom and independence ever inclines us to swerve from divine authority. The cause lurks in our pride, which cannot be trampled upon, except by the humble admission of our unworthiness and our littleness in the face of those absolute rights the Creator has upon our creature. Thus it is that even in this purely natural state we would still have a fight to wage against the threefold concupiscence. If far from yielding to these evil inclinations we would have done our duty, we could have justly expected a reward. For our mortal soul, this reward would have consisted first in a deeper and greater knowledge of God and of truth, a knowledge, of course, analytical and discursive, then in a love also purer and more enduring. If, on the contrary, we would have voluntarily violated the law in grave matter and remained unrepentant, we should have failed of our end, meriting as punishment the privation of God and such torments as would fit the gravity of our faults. This would have been our condition had we been constituted in a merely natural state. This state has not, as a matter of fact, ever existed, for according to St. Thomas Aquinas, man was raised to the supernatural state at the very moment of creation, or immediately after, as St. Bonaventure says. God, in his infinite goodness, was not satisfied with conferring upon man natural gifts. He willed to elevate him to a higher state by granting him still others of a preternatural and supernatural character. The next selection I'm going to read to you on our dialogue from going from selfishness to selflessness is a selection from the Philokalia. These are a series of books about the writings of the early desert fathers of the church. These are men who went into the desert and lived an ascetical life in order to attain union with God. My first selection is by St. John of Damascus, and it is entitled On the Virtues and the Vices. Man is a twofold being, comprising soul and body, and has two orders of senses and two corresponding orders of virtues. The soul has 5 senses and the body 5. The senses of the soul, which are also called the faculties, are intellect, reason, opinion, fantasy, and sense perception. The senses of the body are sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch. The virtues which belong to these senses are twofold, and so too are the vices. Everyone should know how many virtues there are of the soul and how many of the body, and what kind of passions belong to the soul and what kind to the body. The virtues which we ascribe to the soul are primarily the 4 cardinal virtues: courage, moral judgment, self-restraint, and justice. These give birth to the other virtues of the soul: faith, hope, love, prayer, humility, gentleness, long-suffering, forbearance, kindness, freedom from anger, knowledge of God, cheerfulness, simplicity, calmness, sincerity, freedom from vanity, freedom from pride, absence of envy, honesty, freedom from avarice, compassion, mercifulness, generosity, fearlessness, freedom from dejection, deep compunction, modesty, reverence, desire for the blessings held in store, longing for the kingdom of God, and aspiration for divine sonship. Besides these are the bodily virtues, or rather the tools or instruments of virtue. When used with understanding in accordance with God's will, and without the least hypocrisy or desire to win men's esteem, they make it possible to advance in humility and dispassion. They are self-control, fasting, hunger, thirst, staying awake, keeping all-night vigils, constant kneeling, not washing, the wearing of a single garment, eating dry food, eating slowly, drinking nothing but water, sleeping on the ground, poverty, total shedding of possessions, austerity, disregard of personal appearance, unselfishness, solitude, preserving stillness, not going out, enduring scarcity, being self-supporting, silence, working with your own hands in every kind of hardship and physical asceticism, with other similar practices. When the body is strong and disturbed by carnal passions, they are all indispensable and extremely beneficial. When the body is weak, however, and with the help of God has overcome these passions, such practices are not as vital as holy humility and thanksgiving, which suffices for everything. Something should also be said about the vices or the passions of the soul and the body. The passions of the soul are forgetfulness, laziness, and ignorance. When the soul's eye, the intellect, has been darkened by these three, the soul is dominated by all the other passions. These are impiety, false teaching, or every kind of heresy, blasphemy, wrath, anger, bitterness, irritability, inhumanity, rancor, backbiting, censoriousness, senseless dejection, fear, cowardice, quarrelsomeness, jealousy, envy, self-esteem, pride, hypocrisy, falsehood, unbelief, greed, love of material things, attachment to worldly concerns, listlessness, faint-heartedness, ingratitude, grumbling, vanity, conceit, pomposity, boastfulness, love of power, love of popularity, deceit, shamelessness, insensibility, flattery, treachery, pretense, indecision, assent to sins arising from the soul's passible aspect and dwelling on them continuously, wandering thoughts, self-love, the mother of vices, avarice, the root of all evil, and finally malice and guile.